Check this out. A person apparently in Hong Kong who gives herself the name Hong Konger is showing incredible disrespect to the victims of the city's recent tower block by publishing photographs of burned corpses, while at the same time she absurdly blames the whole thing on the Chinese government in Beijing. But when we click on her location, we find she's posting from the United States using a US region app. So what's really going on there? There's more. The Western mainstream media is shockingly reporting that the Hong Kong government is oppressing Hong Kong individuals who just want to help, and has arrested a man who was simply asking for accountability. What's really happening there? One more thing. Looking at datelines over the past week, we note that even while the fire was burning in the towers, certain journalists were already pushing out deeply politicized reports about the fire. Who's exploiting the fire? Who were they? Here's what you need to know. Hong Kong is on guard as the first signs of a new hybrid warfare attack are emerging. Now, knowledgeable observers say hostile forces are on standby and making opening moves as the city reels from a deadly fire that killed more than 150 people. That was a huge blaze that spanned 7 tower blocks. Now, what we're seeing is a number of low-profile steps that match previous colour revolution attempts in Hong Kong and elsewhere, of course. These have always been launched following major news events that can be exploited to polarise society. Now, the technique is quite well known. Foreign forces use co-opted China hostile media to politicise events, and at the same time they use underground money to foster anger against the government. The hostilities then escalated into protest movements and then actual street battles. In multiple cases around the world, the final result has been regime change, with NED supporters or employees taking leadership roles. Now, of course, people always respond to such accusations by pressing the argument that, well, the social issues that people are complaining about are real. But this is a clever way of missing the point. The CIA and other agencies always identify real social issues on which to focus. That's the heart of their strategy. They build on these. Now, this week, just as we've seen in the past, the international media is quoting US-funded sources while deliberately hiding their funding from the public. But don't take my word for it. Here are some elements for you to consider. Number one, there's been a number of disasters in Asia this week. At least 176 dead in Thailand, 366 dead in Sri Lanka, more than 600 dead in Indonesia, and about 150 dead in Hong Kong. So many tragedies. But anyone who follows the news can immediately see that all these events are being reported straight by the international media, except one. The Hong Kong reports are being thoroughly politicized. None of the others are. If you're one of many people who have noticed that, you're not imagining it. A comprehensive data-driven study by researchers in London and Hong Kong showed conclusively that Western mainstream media over-politicizes all events related to Hong Kong and mainland China. In other words, journalists morph into anti-China propagandists every time they cover this region. I can provide a link if you want the original document. Number two, US-funded China demonizers are coming out of the woodwork, and journalists are quoting them as if they represented Hong Kong and hiding their funding. For example, in her coverage of the fire, the Guardian reporter Amy Hawkins mainly quotes the notorious Michael Moe. Now, he was one of a group of people who were always labelled pro-democracy activists by Western journalists, but who were seen by Hong Kong people as traitors who were literally paid by the United States for their constant work, which is to demonize our city and our country. Now, Mo became a laughingstock in Hong Kong earlier this year when he admitted on a Taiwan TV channel that the Hong Kong Overseas Pro-Democracy Group found it hard to continue their work because the United States had stopped paying them. Here's the clip.
How has the Hong Kong overseas community been able to continue pro-democracy activity and activism abroad?
It is a tough call, I would say, because of the funding cuts from the US government, funding cuts from the US government, funding cuts from the US government.
So you can see Hong Kong people got it right. But of course Reuters, The Guardian, the BBC and all the others, they continue to hide the truth. They've long quoted US paid agents as if they represented Hong Kong people. How absurd is that? Now, you notice that Mo indicated that the US had stopped funding the anti-China Hong Kong diaspora. But it's not been generally reported that the US has restarted that funding operation. If we go through the relevant NED papers, we find there's a sum of $400,000 this year to give to US allied people among the Hong Kong overseas community. Nice bit of pocket money there for trolls to create problems. Now, all this cash, of course, is in addition to Hong Kong focused funding by the CIA, by the US military intelligence, by the Department of Homeland Security, and by at least 2 UK groups. So in short, there's an astonishingly massive heap of money waiting for people who want to escalate social issues in Hong Kong. Number 3, Hong Kong people are concerned about outside interference. That's what's really happening. Let me show you how the US hybrid warfare operation works. Along with many others, I've now watched the operation multiple times. So first, US and UK agents train numbers of sleeper agents to stand by to protest. Then they continuously monitor issues in the city to identify which ones are big enough to be listed as potential flashpoints. In the past, they listed Article 23, Occupy Hong Kong, the fishbowl store protests, remember those? And the extradition amendment, all listed as flashpoints. Now, at this time, we can say for sure that hybrid warfare step 1 clearly has been taken. The fire in Tai Po has definitely been listed as a potential new flashpoint. Hybrid warfare step 2 is to exploit the anger, escalating it to create social unrests. That's what Hong Kong security people are looking out for, and that's what they are finding. So, for example, a mysterious young man with a criminal record creates a list of numbered demands. Does that remind you of anything? Note also that the man calls for accountability, as if nothing had been done about finding out who should be blamed for causing the fire. Yet it's clear that he called for accountability after the people who managed the renovation had been arrested, after 250 other buildings had been inspected, after labs in Hong Kong and mainland China were analysing the bamboo and the sheet netting and the styrofoam barriers, after the building department and the housing department were reviewing their policies. Clearly, his call for accountability made no logical sense. Now, hybrid warfare step 3 is to create mass engagement and open channels for further secret funding. This is normally done through what are sometimes known as solidarity websites, so change.org or GoFundMe.com and so on. Now, they don't sound dangerous, do they? In fact, they're very dangerous. United Nations specialists have been warning the world for years that people have been using these websites to transfer money, which then gets used to buy weapons and explosives for acts of terrorism. That's because the money received for the purchase of guns and bombs is real, but it's difficult for the victims to trace the donors. And that's exactly what happened in Hong Kong. A group of Hong Kong protesters called the Dragon Slayers Brigade was sent a large sum of money from an unknown source through a crowdfunding site. They used it to buy explosives, which they intended to set off in one try, killing large numbers of people. They also got firearms. I'm not talking about, pistols. They had an AK-47. So Hong Kong people, like people in many other countries, including Europe as a whole, is cracking down on crowdfunding. That's why Hong Kong and other places look suspiciously at troublemakers using these crowd solidarity websites. Does that make sense now? Step 4 is to co-opt the media. Their part of the hustle is to tell the world there are no foreign forces doing anything in Hong Kong and paint an image of a community that wants desperately to be like the glorious paradise of the Western democratic world, but which is being brutally repressed by mainland China. This is all rubbish, but it's the ideology of the West. Reuters, rather shockingly, horribly politicized this on Thursday, as the towers were still burning, as firefighters were risking their lives, as Hong Kong people were frantically trying to help. The reporters were Greg Turode and Antoni Slodkowski. On behalf of the journalism profession, I'd like to apologise to the people of Hong Kong for the behaviour of these people in my profession. What they did was really heartless and wrong. I'm really sorry. One more observation. Now, most people know that the US has passed various bills to finance negative news of China. $300 million to counter China, $500 million to denounce the Belt and Road Initiative, $325 million a year on malign influence campaigns and so on. And of course, people who print bad things about China have been getting the lion's share of the $2.8 billion set aside for what they call democracy assistance programs, which exist to put pro-Washington people in power everywhere around the world. All that is on top of the CIA's anti-China billion-dollar budget and military intelligence billion-dollar anti-China budget. It's like, you know all that. But many people don't know that there are additional separate budgets to stir up trouble specifically in Hong Kong. For instance, I saw a US one in December 2023 that hived off 23 million Hong Kong dollars to be sent here to create trouble. Now, the average young person in this city earns 19,000 Hong Kong dollars a month. So 23 million buys you a lot of young people willing to make trouble. Also, this year, there was a general payment of $800,000 by Ned to respond to the intensifying repression within the People's Republic of China, whatever that means. We don't know who got that either. That was just one of many, many tranches of cash hived off to create problems for China. What can ordinary people do? We just got to stand up for the truth. We can stand up for Hong Kong. We can stand up for a community that's being unfairly used by the West as a political tool against Beijing. Peace.